Christian women, the Bible tells us we must love. We must love God and we must love our neighbor. But what does it mean to love God? There's a few verses that sums up what it means to love God. And from the front to the back, it tells you how to love God. And it never changes. In 1 John chapter 5, he tells us how to love our neighbor, his children, and how to love him. So 1 John chapter 5, verse 2, by this we know that we love the children of God when we love God and keep his commandments. For this is the love of God, that we keep his commandments, and his commandments are not grievous. So the love of God is to keep God's commandments. In Matthew 22, Yeshua the Messiah tells us that we must love God and we must love our neighbor as ourselves, right? And all the law and all the prophets hang on his 2 commandments. What does it mean to love God with all your heart, soul, and mind? Well, the Messiah was quoting Deuteronomy chapter 6, verse 5. And thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, with all thy soul, and with all thy might. And these words that which command thee this day shall be in thy heart. And Deuteronomy chapter 6 goes on to explain that we are to teach the 10 commandments to our children. We're to keep them in our heart, the 10 commandments in our heart. We're to teach them to our children. And if we do that, in verse 25 of the chapter, if we observe to do all those commandments as the Lord thy God has commanded us, it will be our righteousness. So to love God with all your heart, soul, and mind is to keep the 10 commandments in our hearts, teach them to our children, and if we do that, it will be our righteousness. His second commandment in Matthew 22, we must love our neighbor. You can find that in Leviticus 19:15 through 18. Yeshua quotes it. And all the law hangs on his 2 commandments, to love God, keep the 10 commandments, and love our neighbor. And Leviticus 19:15 through 18 says to do no unrighteousness in judgment, but only judge by the righteousness of God. And that's to love God. The love of God is the keeping of the commandments. So his righteousness, that will be your righteousness. So only judge by the righteousness of God, the love of God, the 10 commandments. And if your believing neighbor breaks one of those commandments, we are to correct them. Otherwise, if you don't correct them, he says you hate them. We're not to hate our neighbor in our heart, but we're to love them and correct them by rebuking them, just like a child, your child, you're going to correct them. You want to correct your neighbor. Love thy neighbor as thyself. I am the Lord. 1 Timothy chapter 5, verse 8 also instructs us that we are to bring our children up in the Lord and teach our household. And if you don't do that, if you don't bring them up in the love of God, the commandments of God, and provide for your household, you're worse than an infidel. Paul says in 1 Corinthians 7 that he kind of puts it perfectly. He says circumcision or uncircumcision is nothing. The sacrificial law is nothing but keeping the commandments of God. In 1 Corinthians 15, he says, moreover, lest you believe all that I had written unto you, you'll believe in vain. And he sums up everything. If you are confused about what Paul's saying, he sums everything up right before chapter 15 and chapter 14, verse 37. He says, all that he had written unto you were the commandments of God. In Malachi 3, Jehovah tells us that he will never change. So Jacob is not consumed, and we know his judgments. In Ecclesiasticus chapter 12, verse 13, the full duty of man is to keep the commandments of God, to love God. In Matthew 5, the Messiah tells us in Matthew 5, verse 19, whosoever therefore shall break one of these least commandments and shall teach men so, he shall be called least in the kingdom of heaven. But whosoever shall do and teach them, keep the commandments. If you do all these commandments, love God, Deuteronomy chapter 6, if you do all these commandments, it will be your righteousness. But whosoever shall do and teach them, the same shall be called great in the kingdom of heaven. And then he goes on to say, for I say unto you, that except your righteousness shall exceed the righteousness of the scribes and Pharisees, you shall in no case enter into the kingdom of heaven. Well, in Matthew 15 and Mark 7, Yeshua rebuked the Pharisees for breaking the commandments of God by their traditions of men. He also rebuked them by telling them that the Pharisees flattered Jehovah with their mouth, but their heart was far from them. And from the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks. Yeshua's first and great commandment, to love God with all your heart, soul, and mind, Deuteronomy chapter 6, you're to keep the commandments in your hearts. And from the heart, the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks. He tells you again, Yeshua, in John 5, verse 42 and 43, he told them, I know you don't have the love of God in you. Because again, 1 John 5, verse 3, this is the love of God, to keep his commandments. He says, I know you don't have the love of God in you. I came in my Father's name and you didn't receive me. But there's going to be another that comes in his own name that you'll receive. He warns them that they're going to receive a different Messiah. They didn't recognize the Son because they didn't have the love of God in them. In Daniel 11, verse 30, it tells us that Satan will have indignation against the 10 commandments, the love of God, the covenants, in Deuteronomy 5. And then he'll gain intelligence with those who forsake the holy covenants, the 10 commandments, with flatteries. In 2 John chapter 2, verse 3 and 4, it tells us how we know him. When we keep his commandments, we love God and we love neighbor. We keep the commandments of God and we teach our neighbor to keep the commandments of God. We love the children of God by keeping the commandments. And those who say they know him and keep not his commandments, they are liars, and the truth is not in them. And John 14, Yeshua tells you how to receive the Spirit of truth so he can abide with you, and it's you must love him and keep his commandments. The disciples remembered this in Acts 5:32 and told the Pharisees this again and said, we are witnesses along with the Holy Ghost. The Spirit of truth is the Holy Ghost in John 14. We are witnesses along with the Holy Ghost given to those who obey God, who love him and keep his commandments. In Revelations 22, verse 14, it says, blessed are they who do his commandments, that they have right to the tree of life and are able to enter into the gates of the city. And those without the love of God are the dogs and the whoremongers and the adulterers and the idolaters and those who love it to make a lie. We are to love God and we're to love neighbor. This is the full duty. We must have the love for our neighbor, and we must love them and correct them when they are not keeping the commandments of God. You can find the commandments in Deuteronomy 5 and Exodus 20. In Deuteronomy 5, it instructs you to keep the Sabbath day as Jehovah has commanded us to keep it on the 7th day. That's dawn Saturday to dawn Sunday. And don't forget, Yeshua rebuked the Pharisees for flattering Yah with their mouth, but not keeping the commandments, breaking them by their traditions. of men.